Hello, everyone. I have 1 o'clock, so with the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jessica Craho with the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment and a member of Iowa's Employment First Leadership Team. Welcome to April's Community of Practice. What's new in the world of secondary transition? Before we get started, I want to thank the Employment First team, Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, and the DD Council for their continued collaboration with ICE and investment in the community of practice. We will be recording today's session and we'll send out the materials. Amy has been so kind as to put a link in the chat for you to the slides or to the presentation, so go check that out. We'll be sure to send the recording and the materials out to the mailing list afterwards. If you're not a member of the mailing list or one of your teammates is not and wants to be, just send me a message in the chat or email me at pruittjess@gmail.com. Captions will be provided. Thank you to the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation with the Georgia Institute of Technology and our lead captioner, Heather. Thank you so much. You can access the live stream in the chat there, the link, or you can also select the live captions feature along the control panel, usually found at the bottom of your Zoom screen or the top. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our oh so wonderful presenter for today. We have Kirsten Lane with us. She's a secondary transition program facilitator with the Department of Education. And she is the bee's knees in secondary transition.
Oh, that's no problem at all. I'll be over there.
If you haven't muted yourself, go ahead and do that just to help with any audio issues and interruptions. But our presenter for today is Kirsten Lane, and we're really lucky to have her. She's an expert in secondary transition and kind of all things going on in the world of school and transition and high school students and work. So we're really lucky to have her. She's going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in transition right now, give us some updates, and then do a review for us of Iowa's new IEP system, Achieve. So Kirsten, thank you so much, and take it away. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Jess. I'm really happy to be here. I welcome all of you who have chosen to take some time today to spend with us to just kind of get updated on what's going on in education. Anytime there's an opportunity for us to come with our partners in the adult service side of the transition work, I'd love to take that opportunity. So thank you and welcome to all of you. What I'm going to be talking about today, I'll do a brief review new IEP system that's not just around secondary transition, but for early access through age 21 IEP system. So I'll talk about that. And then I'll close by sharing a few additional resources and bits of information. So let's start with, okay, why, there we go. Why Achieve? Why are we changing our IEP system? And the legacy system was cutting edge for all of us when it was launched in 2005. And many of you may say, well, I've never heard of the legacy system. We've never called it that until now when we're in this transition. The legacy system is the old IEP system. But so that we have no confusion when we're talking about Achieve and legacy, the old system, we wanted everybody to have that terminology. So the legacy system was cutting edge when it was launched in 2005. Well, you know how technology changes so quickly right now. That was really quite a long time ago, almost 20 years. So we're ready for something new. So Achieve was designed to really assist teams in designing their services to support the individual, to maximize the system functions, to really support practices. So you're going to hear about, and you won't really see, we're not getting into the system, but you'll hear about how the system supports practices around secondary transition and really supports the IEP team in developing a quality secondary transition IEP. There are also increased opportunities you'll hear about for team collaboration and communication, increased use within the system to collect procedural compliance kinds of information. And it's one system, Birth to 21. In our current system with Legacy, early access had a different system, and then kids had to transition over to the Legacy system. So, you know, our goal with all of this was that really we could increase the amount of time that all of us have to provide services and supports for kids. And I just realized that I talked right through that and didn't advance my screen for all those little dot points. So, so the objectives for today's session are to provide an overview of the requirements around secondary transition, to describe, we're going to talk about the Iowa transition model, which is a model that is used in education, but really the more our partners know about it and the more everybody's talking the same language and using that model, the stronger it will be. So I'm going to share a little bit about that, some key components of secondary transition within the Achieve process, and then some overview of the post-secondary summary and some additional information, additional resources and information. So secondary transition requirements within IDEA. I think most of you have familiarity with this, but I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. So it can be confusing at times because in the VR world, they're required to do pre-employment transition services. So transition is a part of their work. In the school side of things, transition is a part of our work. Adult service providers come in and work with case managers, and transition is a part of their work. So for educators, transition services are required under IDEA. And they're required to be a coordinated set of activities that are results oriented. So we'll talk about later in this conversation, the post-secondary expectations. Those are the results or the outcomes. So we really are not necessarily, once we get into transition, the IEP is still an annual document, but we're really looking at building that IEP to address the outcomes or the results, the post-secondary expectations. It's based on individual student needs, and it can be inclusive of things like instruction and related services that happen at school, as well as community experience, other adult living kinds of activities, and those linkages. So really talking about those linkages. Iowa requires transition planning to begin by age 14. So prior to age 14 is really the way the language is stated. So generally you'll see that transition planning starts when the student is 13 years old, so that it is in place by the time they turn 14. It's updated annually and is focused on, again, as I said before, the student reaching those post-secondary goals or post-secondary expectations. Our Iowa transition model is a framework to help us really look at a consistent process to reaching those post-secondary goals. So you will find across the state that you may have teachers that have not heard of the Iowa transition model. You may have teachers that use the Iowa transition model in their work every single day, all day long, and everything in between. It's been around for a number of years. The Iowa transition model is not new, but it's kind of waved in and out in a lot of places. And some folks, I think, use parts of the model, but don't use all of the model. So regardless of how the teachers that you're working with use the model, understanding it is going to help you to be, I think, a partner in the transition planning process. So let's take a look. So the Iowa transition model can be found on the DE website in the secondary transition area, which is how I'm accessing it right now. The model starts out with just learning about the student's strengths, interests, and preferences. And then looking at their post-secondary expectations connected to those strengths and preferences.
Yeah.
The essential skills then that they need for post-secondary expectations are defined. And then we begin to assess, more assessment to really figure out. And I'm not going to go into this in great detail, because you'll have access to it from the slide deck and you'll be able to go in and look at it a little bit more. But the point I want to really make clear with this is we start with looking at where does that student want to be, identifying those post-secondary expectations, and then really assessing to determine what are they going to need in terms of skills, in terms of services, in terms of maybe linkages or connections to reach those post-secondary expectations. So really built on a lot of good, solid assessment. And from there, once we know what that discrepancy is right here, once we know what that discrepancy is between where they are right now and where they want to be, we begin to address those by developing instructional plans, so goals and objectives maybe in the IEP, so really a place where we're determining what skills they need to learn, or it might be courses that they need to take, it might be activities that need to happen as a supplement or a part of their IEP that's a part of the services and supports that they need to reach their post-secondary expectations. This third column over here is full of information that helps you dig a little deeper into the step. And then finally, developing those goals, delivering the services, and monitoring progress on all of the above, the services, the goals, the activities, the linkages that we said needed to be made, all of those things. So really monitoring. At any time, you might zip in and out of here. You might be working along and working toward a post-secondary expectation, and that expectation might change. Or the skills that the student is developing, they make some growth, and we might need to go back in and do further assessment. We might need to come back around. So really looking at this not as a linear kind of model where you walk through step by step by step, but that you revisit the steps of this model whenever you need to. Ton of information in here, really helpful questions to be thinking about as you're prioritizing and determining what next steps might be for a student. This middle section, the SDI model, that's specially designed instruction, is SDI. And the SDI model is a model not just around secondary transition, but a model around delivering that specially designed instruction, that special content in a way that is designed to meet an individual student's needs. So there's a connection here. So for example, as you're determining the discrepancy, the SDI model is about diagnosing what the need is, developing or designing a plan, and then delivering that instruction or delivering that plan. And so there's a connection here to that SDI model. Not critical for you to know that, to work with the model, but I wanted you to just understand why it was there. Okay. I am also going to share just briefly with you so you'll know what it is. Another document that is that supports the Iowa transition model, but was developed during the time when students were getting their instruction virtually or in a hybrid kind of model. They weren't necessarily in the classroom. And I share this. Our hope is that we're not going back to those days. I mean, there's not any plan for that is in the near future. So not from that perspective, but from the perspective of there are a lot of resources And there's a visualization here of practically what does this look like if you're in person? What might it have looked like if you were virtual? But then what are some resources and information that you might be able to use to support each step of this model? And I'm not going to scroll all the way through it again, but I just wanted you to know what that second document was in case you wanted to access it later. All right, now we'll move on to the PLAF. And the only reason I really wanted to talk about the PLAF is because I really like saying it, PLAF. Everybody try it where you are. Okay, so the PLAF, the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. So really the PLAF is the place, the process and the place within the IEP where we're really gathering information about where is this student right now? What are their present levels? What information do we currently have to begin to develop the IEP for this next school year for this student? And there are some specific things related to transition within the PLAF that I wanted to share with you. So transition assessment and post-secondary expectations. We just talked about that quite a bit when we were talking about the Iowa transition model. There's a lot of assessment that goes on in the transition planning process. And that assessment is related to post-secondary expectations. As we just talked about in the model, when you know where the student is headed,
Just irritated.
our goal becomes
Must be
figuring
pissed.
out where are they right now and what do they need to get there. And so post-secondary expectations in living, learning, and working end up driving the entire IEP process. Transition assessment includes multiple sources, and it's an ongoing process, and again, connected to the post-secondary expectations. But those multiple sources can include all of you folks. So our VR counselors contribute to that, a case manager contributes to that, family members contribute to that, the student obviously contributes to that, but it's not a teacher sitting down and gathering information to put into an IEP, but it's a process of gathering information that gets a broad look at who is this student and where are they going and how can we as an IEP team, multidisciplinary team, help them get there. The goals and services are developed to address those needs. And as I said, our partners are all involved in the process. Now, something else that's new within the IEP process with the Achieve system is that we have developed drop down the post-secondary expectation categories, and there's a drop down menu. Without seeing the IEP, it might be hard to visualize, but I'm just going to talk about the intent of it, because if you are involved in an IEP meeting, you might hear some conversation about this and wonder what it's referring to. So currently, if you remember back to the beginning when I said there's the ability to collect some data and some ongoing outcomes from this new system, this is one of the areas where that occurs. So as a student and the IEP team develop the post-secondary expectation for living, for learning, and for work for each of the students, it's an individualized statement that is written into the IEP as to where that person is going to be 1 year out, post-high school. There's no way for us with an individualized statement to gather any kind of meaningful data from that. And so what we did was created categories that you can see here on the screen that correlate with post-secondary expectations. So for example, a student who's going to live in the dorms would check that independent living without supports, age appropriate, living in a dorm or an apartment, that kind of thing. If student's going to live with family member, that second drop down category would be chosen, but the statement would be an individualized statement for that student. Same thing goes, I'm going to jump over to the working category. If a student's going to work full-time or part-time, if a student's going to be self-employed. So when we choose one of these categories for each area, living, learning, and working, we're then able to, down the road, identify, for example, in a school district, if they had 20 students graduating and 10 of those students said that they were going to go to a community college post-high school. Down the road, when we look at indicator 14 or our post-secondary outcomes, we can identify that in district ABC, 50% of their kids said, or 10 of their 20 kids said that they were going to go into post-secondary education at a community college setting. And in actuality, only 3 students did. So that gives that district ABC some really valuable information, because there's a gap between what their students said they were going to do and what they actually did. And so then they can dig in to try to figure out, are we not doing a good job of developing post-secondary expectations? Are we not really analyzing the assessment information that we have and helping that student come up with a meaningful plan? Or are we not providing the linkages and connections and services that would help them to be successful in that next environment? Or are we not providing the instruction and the preparation and the skills that they're going to need to be successful in that environment? So really being able to dig in and try to figure out, where's the gap? Why are things not happening the way our students expected them to be happening for them in their post-secondary expectations? So we're really excited about being able to take a deeper look and help districts to really customize and provide the services that each of their individual students need. The final area within the PLAF that I wanted to talk about today is the course. This is going to look a bit different. In our current course of study, for all students, we list all of the graduation requirements that are needed for them to graduate from that particular high school, and then each year update how many of those requirements they've met, how many they still have to meet. In 2018, the fall of 2018, there was a change in requirements around, wait, let me back up just a quick second. So in the legacy system, we record all of the graduation requirements. In this, that will not be a requirement, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But before I talk about that, I do want to talk about the diploma certificate situation. In 2018, the fall of 2018, that students who were freshmen that year had a change in the requirements around graduation for students with IEPs. I am not going to spend a lot of time because we've done a lot of webinars on that, and there is a lot of information on the DE website. In fact, I have linked those things right here, and when you get the slide deck, you'll be able to look at any of those that you want. Also, there are webinars on the DE website right next to these documents. So you'll be able to go in and get information if you need more information about this change in certificate. But the bottom line is students with an IEP need to meet 433 at a minimum, but meet the graduation requirements of the district that they're attending. And as IEP teams, we need to make sure that we're collaborating with school counselors and registrars and whoever is keeping track of credits to ensure that the student is on track and to provide the support that they need to get on track if they're not. So graduation requirements are at a minimum 433. In the IEP, under Achieve, the very first thing that will pop up when we get to the course of study is, are you working toward a diploma or a certificate of attendance? And so there's an opportunity right there for us to begin to talk about what that student's plan for high school is. So whether it be a diploma, which is that 433 at a minimum, or it be a certificate of attendance and really working toward goals and outcomes within the IEP, that's an IEP team decision. We encourage all IEP teams to begin with that graduation as an outcome. And if there is not an option for that doesn't feel like a good fit, that way would be an option to change it down the road. I think if we have questions about that, we can come back to that a little bit later. I want to get through the content, but please, if you do have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll try to address them if we can. The next part of the course of study, though, is the courses and activities to meet the post-secondary expectation. As I said earlier, it used to be that we put in all of the courses required to meet graduation in this section of the IEP. And within Achieve, that's still an option if somebody wants to do that, but it's not required. What is required is that we document what the student needs to meet their post-secondary expectations. So we're projecting from their current IEP to the time that they leave high school. This is the only place within the IEP system where we're really looking at recording information or writing out a plan that projects beyond a year. IEPs are written for a year, but this is really helping us to look at what are all of the things that we need to fit into this student's plan, into this student's schedule from now until they leave high school that will help them to reach their post-secondary expectations or their PSE in living, learning, and work. It's based on their individual needs and preferences. It can include linkages. So we might record that they are going to be referred to the disability services coordinator at the community college, or that they're going to be referred for eligibility with IVRS or with IDB, or it might be that they need habilitation services. And so we're going to refer them to those services. So it can include any kind of linkage and multi-year planning. And we should be thinking beyond academics. So this course of study can include activities like job shadowing, or they can include activities like visits to a community college. So it really is thinking beyond, like really looking deep at what are those post-secondary expectations and what are the things that the student is going to need to know and be able to do to reach those post-secondary expectations. Okay. Another thing that's new within the system, within the Achieve system, and it's not built directly into the Achieve system, but connected within the system, is a direct link to pre-employment transition services, or PREETs. So I don't know, I'm guessing that most of you in the audience know a little bit about PREETs, but PREETs are those services that a VR counselor might provide to a student or a group of students before that student is determined eligible for VR services. So they're considered potentially eligible, or they're considered that they might be eligible for VR services. And so the pre-employment transition services are delivered generally during the school day, although they can be delivered outside of the school day, and require a PREETs agreement. And that PREETs agreement needs to be signed by a parent. So as we were developing the system for Achieve, one of the things that we talked about was how it might be beneficial to the family members as well as to the entire IEP team if we could access that PREETs agreement, so that when a family member was there for an IEP meeting and meeting with school folks, if the VR counselor wasn't there, we could still talk about what are PREETs and get an agreement signed if that student was indeed interested in and able to benefit from the PREETs services. So teachers are going to be provided with an overview of what PREETs are. a description of the 5 pre-ETS required activities, and then step-by-step instructions for completing the pre-ETS agreement, so that that can happen during the IEP meeting. And hopefully get the student on track for receiving those services early, because that has been an issue that has been challenging for VR counselors, is how do they connect with families? And sometimes it's hard to get that connection in place with families. And so we thought if we could take advantage of that IEP meeting, that would be beneficial. So you might hear teachers talking about pre-ETS. You might hear the IEP team in an IEP meeting, them talking about a pre-ETS agreement and getting the pre-ETS agreement signed for the student to begin those services. And that's what they're referring to. Then I also want to talk about the post-secondary summary for living, learning, and working. The post-secondary summary is the final area that we're going to be covering regarding the Achieve system during this training. We're going to talk about a few other things when that's over, but really regarding the enhancements and changes within Achieve, this is the final area that we'll be talking about. So the post-secondary summary is required under IDEA. I think IDEA refers to it as a summary of performance, but it's required that we have something that summarizes the student's academic achievement and functional performance. Do you recognize those letters? It's part of that PLAF playing. Anyway, so we're required to have a summary of the student's academic achievement and functional performance and recommendations on how to assist that student post-high school in meeting their PSEs. I think the intent of this is really to be a support with communication. So in many cases, a student might have been in a school district for 13 years, sometimes 14 or 15. They might have spent a lot of time, and everybody in school knows them, or even just high school, the last 4 or 5 years, maybe they've been in a high school setting. Sometimes they've had the same teacher for 4 or 5 years. We've learned a lot about what works for that student. We've learned a lot about what doesn't work for that student. We know a lot about what they can do at this point. We know a lot about how they learn best. And I think the intention is that we be able to share that with you. So as they move on to another environment, or they move on to another agency, or other services or supports in a community college setting, that we have been able to share some of the things that work best for that student to try to avoid having to reinvent the wheel. The post-secondary summary is required anytime a student graduates or turns 21. It's optional, but encouraged for students who drop out or exit school for other reasons. But it is required for everyone who graduates or ages out. So what's included? It's a summary of their current level of functioning in each goal area. So every goal area that they've had, whether it be reading or math or employability skills or adaptive behavior, whatever it might be, there's a summary of what their current level of functioning is in each of these goal areas. There's also a review of their current level of performance related to living, learning, and working. So we look at what are they currently able to do? How have they responded to instruction in these areas? What are some recommendations for the future? Just generally in the areas of living, learning, and working. And then also a summary of any linkages and recommended resources that the IEP team has made for that student. So when we're talking about the supports and resources for linkages, these are the broad areas that we, again, the development team went through in great detail to come up with what are the most commonly used areas, so that when they're working through the IEP, they can look through these areas. These are the things that most often students consider. There's obviously an other as well. So we're not limiting you to just these 14 categories or 13 categories and other, but that really you should be able to find for most of your students what they need within these broad categories. And what we heard oftentimes was that in a smaller district, that a teacher may not have a student who needs to be referred to habilitation services very often, so they aren't familiar with the process. And so what we did with those 13 categories was came up with some really deep guidance about each of those category areas. And I'm going to click here. They're currently stored on the, they're currently stored on the Iowa Secondary Transition Learning Community website. And I'm going to share that link with you in the documents down the road here, a couple slides, but here's those 13 categories. So within each of these categories, I'm just going to click on long-term services and supports, and you will find a document. And the documents are all set up very similarly in that there is an overview of that document, of that content area. And then we tried to loop in throughout the Achieve process, self-advocacy and self-determination skills. So this is one of the places where that comes in, because we know it's an evidence-based practice. Like, if students are more self-determined, if students are more involved in their planning, if students have a voice, that they are more likely to achieve their outcomes. So we put in some specific kinds of think abouts regarding self-advocacy or self-determination in each of these documents. And then we provide some details. So here's some information on HCBS waiver programs and HAB services, a comparison chart, which all of this information is readily available lots of other places, but we wanted to streamline it and make it very accessible to teachers and provide the basic information that they needed, as well as go a little deeper. So you'll see as we get down here, it talks about the MHDS system, state supplemental assistance, some other considerations, but then at the very bottom of this document, additional resources and information. And again, every document's set up the same. It ends with additional resources and information. Our illustrious Jess Craho was really instrumental in developing these videos that walk you through, how do I apply for a Medicaid waiver? What is habilitation, or what are HAB services? What is habilitation, and how to apply? How to apply for community supports, rent subsidy. So all kinds of information in one spot. And then some of the documents that are included within there can be easily accessed at the bottom of this scrolling page on the Iowa Secondary Transition Learning Community. So at your fingertips, tons of information. Now, one question that we have gotten is this going to be kept updated? Yes, our goal is to keep it updated because, as we all know, these resources, services, agencies, requirements, it changes on an ongoing basis. It's changing. So what I would just encourage any of you to do, if you are ever on the website and you find some information that is in error, or you find a link that's broken, or you find something that's changed, or you have a question about, there's a place to contact ISTLC, Iowa STLC@gmail.com, but it's on the website. And let us know, and we absolutely will keep them up to date. Okay, so that is all of the information that I have about Achieve, but there are just a few other tidbits with the little bit of time that we have left that I do want to share with you. I3 was developed kind of in conjunction with Achieve, but outside of Achieve, but to support Achieve. So it's not an Achieve system, but it is connected. The I3 is Iowa IDEA information. Those are the three I's. Iowa IDEA information, or I3, is an online procedures and procedure system to help support the implementation of IDEA. So really, I3, I'm going to click on it so you can see it, is just chock full of information about eligibility, about IEPs, about procedural safeguards. There's all kinds of information for family members. There's all kinds of resources related to early intervention and special ed. When you go into special ed, you can choose age-specific resources, and it will take you to all kinds of, here it is. Yeah, age specific, so special ed or early intervention, but it also has just more information than you could ever dream is out there, honestly. So tons of information. If you ever have a question about an IEP and you can't find the information clearly and easily, come to I3. ISTLC we just talked about. I took you to the post-secondary summary page already, but this is the homepage. So it has the post-secondary summary resources that we just saw, but then it also has a professional learning archive, which is Secondary Transition 101, a series that was done last year, which is just an overview of transition planning in 4 sessions. And then recorded webinars over the past couple of years over a variety of different topics. And then about ISTLC, we have a lot of people that have contributed, but as I mentioned, Jess Craho has been a part of it, but currently the lead 3 people are Amy Dessenberg-Wines and myself and Kelsey Teeter, who works in Cedar Rapids. She's with the TAP program there. And then IDEA. I have talked about this in a number of different settings over the years, and I wanted to just give you an update. So IDEA, the differentiated accountability process. So IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act differentiated accountability. So we're really looking at differentiated accountability is using data to improve our outcomes. And so there's a system. I'm not going to click on the link here in the interest of time, but there is a page on the DE website that talks about differentiated accountability through ESSA. And our IDEA process is connected in a broad sense to the ESSA DA process. But it was initiated, in special education through secondary transition work a couple of years ago. And so we went in and worked in about 7 different districts and really looked at helping them examine their data around preparing kids for college and career readiness. And we looked at some of their systems, their leadership system, and their what could be contributing to their data. And then from that, we are now looking at how to expand IDEA into a broader realm of areas. So not just secondary transition, but looking at academics and behavior and identification. So how does our system support kids and outcomes? And there aren't any details really to share with you on that right now. Those will be coming, but they're under development now. And it's really exciting because we're getting to a place where we really can look at identifying data sets that truly do inform us about outcomes and ways to make changes. So that's exciting. I also wanted to share with you some work that we're doing around career technical education. We have a multidisciplinary state team that is looking at how are students with IEPs and students with disabilities in general, but how are students included in career technical education programs where they can get specific skill training, where they can get work-based learning, where they're included with same age peers in their preparation for the world of work. And so we're really excited about this work. We've been looking at some statewide data, and now we're starting to broaden that into looking at how do we really prepare schools and districts and teams for increasing and improving their access to and success in career technical ed for students with disabilities. And then finally, our own Mari Reynolds is on this website as well. She has been the lead in Transition Iowa, which is a website that is has been collaboratively developed between the Department of Education and Ask Resource. But when I say that, really, Mari has been the lead and has done a great job with reworking and redeveloping the Transition Iowa website. And so again, I don't have time to go through and share all of it with you, but I would encourage you to click on that link when you get your slide deck, because there's a ton of great information at Transition Iowa. Oh, I gotta go. Okay, and that's what I have prepared to share. I'd love to hear from you. Collaboration, as I said early on, is really critical in this work. Transition was never designed to be an education thing or an adult service thing or a VR. It really is a shared job. And so any questions about the information I shared today? Or are there things that you would want more information on, or particular topics that you have interest in that you need more learning on, or you have examples you want to share of things that are working really well? So reach out to me anytime. I'm Kirsten Lane, and I love to hear from you. And we do have a few minutes, so if there are questions, Amy and Jess. Stop sharing my screen.
Any questions? Comments? Such a
Okay.
wealth of great information
Wow.
and updates. I know that you explained it so well.
Well, I was just going to ask if there's anyone, Mari, if there's anything you want to say about Transition Iowa, or if there's anyone else on that has, you know, anything that they would add to the conversation. Can you all hear my clock tick-tocking? That's all I can hear right now in this quiet. Oh, Mari, I'm really glad you shared that. I'm going to share my screen again real quick here.
Yeah, and there was a question that came in, just, you know, our educators sharing these resources with parents. So maybe just more of a reminder than a question.
Okay, so the roadmap. I love. There's a lot of things about it that I really like, but the thing I'd love to point out is this right here. So in Iowa, transition planning is required to start by age 14. However, we know that all of these skills, safety skills, understanding my disability, self-advocacy skills, decision-making skills, all of being involved in the community and extracurricular activities, all of that stuff is a part of the journey. And so I love that the roadmap that you all developed was inclusive of those early years, because it really does matter. That you can tell when a student has been involved in that kind of work early on, when they get into middle school and start transition planning. It is a game changer. So yeah, lots of really good information on this website. And when you ask about the questions, I'm sorry, about in the chat, are educators sharing these resources? Almost everything that I shared today is brand new. It's very, very new. And so educators are just being exposed to these things as well. So yes, they will be shared with parents. It's possible that parents haven't seen them yet, although we did do a session with Ask Resource in March, a 3-session series around transition, and shared many of these things as well. So educators will be sharing them as the chief system rolls out, and they're using some of these tools and resources. But yeah, everything here is really pretty darn new. Oh, Drew.
Yes, thank you.
What transition talk would it be if there wasn't a connection to the One Stop American Job Center Iowa Works office near you? So Drew, is there anything you want to say to folks?
Do I ever?
There are limits, but no.
No, I know. Just to let people know that we are open. We are kind of that one-stop option. Again, just from my old job, I would, Job Corps, the Iowa Works office is that central hub to connect job seekers to their next option. So we house Title I services. We house vocational rehabilitation here in Des Moines, Department of Blind. All those types of things are kind of incorporated into that. So as long as you're knowing where those locations are, those are just, if you need that work search help, that's where we're at.
Awesome.
Plus,
Thank you.
plus we have those, if you follow them on social media, you can stay abreast of like job fairs and all that stuff too.
Awesome. Oh, and Alicia, thank you. Yes, Together We Can on May 7th. Great opportunity to get a ton of new information, not around necessarily transition, but definitely transition stuff is included there, but and a link to that event.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, and all that, jumped in on that. Really great stuff and a wealth of information and resources. We'll be sure to share that. Though I know, folks have access to the slides. We'll be sure to share those along with all those links in that email that goes out to everybody.